This is Joanna Lilly. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Since its inception in 1949, Mental Health Awareness Month has been a cornerstone in addressing the challenges faced by millions of Americans living with mental health conditions. Although this month of recognition has been in existence for a while, stigmatization around mental health still exists. Throughout the month of May, we are bringing you episodes from the parent perspective to highlight this special month. Welcome to the Parent Series, brought to you by Success is Subjective.
It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilly.
Sara Beth is a mom to 4 kids. She and her husband live in Greensboro, North Carolina. Their oldest child is neurodivergent and faced significant challenges in public high school. Their journey has required releasing expectations, taking a bold path, and offering freedom. The long and twisting path over the years has been intense and exhausting. When their son's mental health plummeted during his sophomore year of high school, Sara Beth and her husband pulled their son out and enrolled him in a therapeutic wilderness program in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. He spent 3 months in the wilderness program in the winter, and earlier this spring, they transitioned to a therapeutic boarding school in Costa Rica, where he currently lives, receiving support and the opportunity to finish high school in a structured and nurturing environment. Because Sara Beth works for a therapist and learned so much as a parent, she is uniquely positioned to help others. She currently works as an executive skills coach for the Center for Intention and Focus, helping adolescents and adults who struggle with executive functioning challenges. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Sara Beth. All right, so Sara, thanks again for being a guest on the parent series of the Success is Subjective podcast. If you're okay with just kind of jumping right in, can you share a little bit of background story on what was going on with your child prior to kind of jumping into the treatment space?
Sure. So my son, he was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome when he was 6. And so we didn't really understand what to do with that. And even before that, he had a hard time with transitions and just a strong personality as a kid. He would like bang his head against the wall as a toddler when he was in timeout. And so we often felt at a loss as parents in terms of like, what, this kid is intense and we don't know exactly how to help him, but we're doing the best we can. Like all parents, we're just figuring it out as you go. So in his elementary years, we modified his diet and we tried this natural route because the neurologist wanted to put him on some medication for the tics. And really, the tics were never the issue. It was more the behavior, the anger, the impulsivity, and really it was just the lack of self-control. He just had all this emotion and anger. So his elementary years actually went pretty well in some ways because I feel like we were so careful with diet. We had no gluten, no dairy. I homemade everything. It was just a lot of effort, but, I was able to do that and he responded well and we worked through things. We were very involved as parents. But middle school became really intense because there's so much more stimulation and people, and he wanted Skittles and he would eat them off the candy, off the floor because he was just like, I want that. I'm going to eat it. And so we would talk about how dyes affect his behavior and did he feel a trigger or not? And so I taught him to be sensitive to his body and to his brain and to pay attention. But by somewhere in those years, he wanted to do video games. And I feel like that was just another path of destruction in some ways because we said no for the longest time, knowing that could be hard. But, eventually we caved in and gave him Minecraft, but with all these boundaries, like, okay, you can play for this long and all that. But it was just always hard. And so video games for him, he never had enough. He always wanted more. And no matter what limits, what controls, we basically had to put him on a laptop where it would shut itself off so that there was a hard and fast boundary. And that made him angry. And so then he would get violent. He put holes in the wall. He was destructive of our property at times. And that was really tough for him and for us. I have 3 daughters who are younger than my son. And that was tough for them to see their brother out of control. And he didn't know what to do with his anger. In addition, COVID happened his 8th grade year. And so between middle school hormones, all of that, as well as lockdown, it was just a pattern for terrible things. So we knew we needed more help. So we sought the help of experts. We did neurofeedback for him, and that actually really helped with his rage. And we saw incredible results from the neurofeedback. And then we also sought therapy, which I never really felt like helped him much because it was virtual. And I just felt like he told the person what they wanted to hear. And it didn't really impact him or help him much. He was like, do I have to do this? So it just kind of, it was limited in that aspect. We also added medication because we felt he was beginning to express thoughts about hurting himself. And that was really concerning. And we felt like, okay, now we need medication. So we began to try the antidepressant, anti anxiety meds. We also got him a dog because we wanted him to have another being to take care of and to focus on. And, dogs can be great therapy. They're great companions. And we knew he needed that with three sisters in the house. He needed another person or like another being. And that was a good thing for him. Getting outside was really important. And so we actually moved our entire family across the country from Texas to North Carolina because we knew that the climate is better. We actually have more family support on the East Coast. And we wanted to be able to lean on family. And there was a season actually when he was in that lockdown phase when he had so much volatility that we actually let him move in with an uncle for 2 months. And that was kind of our saving grace. It gave the rest of us the chance to catch our breath. And he actually did really well. And it caused us to say, what's wrong with us as parents? Why can't we figure this out? Because we often do things that other people don't. We're holding the boundary for our kids. So by the time, so we moved, and his freshman year was really great. Sophomore year began a really difficult decline because the pressure was mounting and he had AP classes and he knew he could handle it, but the anxiety was too much and he wasn't handling it well. So had a really hard time getting him out of bed. So wake up in the morning was just really intense. Like it would take a long time and he wouldn't get up. He was just feeling depression. So we did change his meds at some point in there and learned that the meds actually made things worse, made him more depressed, more suicidal, which was really scary. So we did some testing called gene site testing, where they can actually look at what meds are good for your genetic makeup. And that was huge. But of course, it took time to figure out the right dosage and all of that. So in that time, he was really struggling in school. And so we sent him to a wilderness camp for a couple of weeks, just a boys' experience where he could just go be outdoors, and he loved it. That was in the summer between sophomore junior year. He also did a mission trip out of the country, which was great because he got perspective on the world. He was with his grandfather. It was a really, great time for him in some ways. But then he came back home. He wanted to play video games. He just didn't have good social skills. He was more comfortable in his room. And I think one of the hardest parts about that is that he didn't see his issues the same way we did. He was in denial and he would say, I'm fine. I've got this together. So he signed himself up junior year for 5 AP classes because he knew he had competency and he knew that he could handle it or whatever. And we were like, oh, this is not good. As parents, we felt like this is a recipe for disaster because we saw the lack of executive functioning skills. So we actually did ADHD testing at that point. We'd always been able to get by until that point. We never needed an ADHD medication or intervention, but we felt like, okay, we need a diagnosis now. And so we did the psychological testing. It did come back with ADHD diagnosis. And so we began to do medication. And we had a coach recommend to let him fail because he didn't see his need for help and he wasn't willing to accept the reality of what we saw. And in fact, one of his therapists was trying to do reality therapy with him because he wanted independence. He wanted freedom. He was 16 at that point. He wanted to live by himself and he was frustrated that he couldn't do that. He hated the limits. And he began to be deviant in some ways with like cell phone usage. Like he also would game during the night. Like we shut the Wi-Fi off. We had to come up with every trick in the book. Like he knew how to change his IP address so that he could get around the boundaries with the Wi-Fi. And so we had to log on, and it was just really intense for all of us. But anyway, long story short, the junior year began just, it was awful. Like he began to not go to school, which had happened some during sophomore year, but junior year, he was just so overwhelmed with the workload because the AP classes and all the workload was too much. So we watched him just spiral out of control with the depression. and we had to watch it and just not intervene because we needed him to see what was happening. So by December of junior year, we were ready to do something different. And we'd had other people kind of speak into our parenting to say, just to offer different tools. It's a whole journey, right, of figuring out what to do. And so we had come into awareness of educational consultants and wilderness and all of that. So December 6th, we pulled him out of high school and we said to him, you're going to go back to a wilderness setting, which he had liked for summer camp, but this was different. And so he was willing to go, and actually, I think relieved, because at that point he knew that he couldn't handle his life and he didn't know what to do. He was stuck. But then he got on his phone and started looking at negative reviews, and that freaked him out. And so it was a really tough day when we took him to wilderness for all of us. It was awful. I would say traumatic for all of us, but he trusted us and he kind of manned up and he went into it. He spent 3 months in wilderness in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was huge. It was amazing. And now he's in a therapeutic boarding school in Costa Rica.
So I'm going to ask you this question. So first of all, thank you. I've just been sitting here silently like, wow, just listening to the whole trajectory. If you could change anything kind of about this experience of like even looking at looking at a wilderness program, therapeutic boarding school abroad, what would you change? And then kind of a follow-up question, which is different. And I also appreciate, what do you wish the general population knew kind of about some of the experiences that you and your son have had through treatment?
Okay, so I'm not sure what I would change, except just I think, of course, retrospect is, you see so much more clearly looking back. So I would say just awareness. If I only knew about all the resources out there, I think I would have felt encouraged and not alone. You just feel so much wiser once you understand, oh my gosh, there's a world of resources out there. I was so grateful to know, and I just felt so empowered and equipped, because that's the worst part, I think, as a parent, is feeling helpless and powerless to change something that is, so scary in the life of your child. So awareness as a parent, knowledge, and I just think deeper connection, because we can't do this alone. And we need to know that there's other people out there struggling with some of the same things.
And then that follow-up question too of, if you wish, what do you wish the general population knew kind of about this space?
Well, I do think the dangers of cell phone usage are pretty intense. And I have learned a lot as a parent about, the executive function deficits and about the impact on our brains of cell phone usage. And I just see parents of young children putting iPads and cell phones into the hands of their kids. And that scares me. And I do think we're beginning to wake up to that, but there's still a huge ripple effect. And I think it's almost out of control. So I'm not sure what I would change, but I just feel like people need to know that it's causing an impact on our kids' brains. So I think I would change. I wish that cell phones weren't available until kids are more like 16. I wish we could turn the clock back and change it.
Totally agree, because I see it with a lot of the young adults that I work with, and especially if they get access to technology much earlier on, or even not just cell phones, but also kind of gaming. I think that kind of hand in hand becomes a little bit problematic. And like you were describing how your son really started finding ways to work around the boundaries that you put in place, it creates a need for deviance, like you said, because their addiction is kind of being fed that way. So let me ask, you kind of hinted at this, like not just like, don't be alone, there are resources out there. Can you elaborate a little bit more on some of those resources maybe that you leaned on as a parent? Some examples of what some of the parents that I've heard about have leaned on could be like listening to podcasts or reading books or connecting with other coaches or seeing their own therapist. Like what on kind of the litany of resources exist did you and your husband actually lean into?
So we did find IT Anon, and that was really helpful with the tech addiction and tech overuse. And I feel like that's an underutilized resource. We were excited to find that. There's a support group there. People have heard of like Alcoholics Anonymous, but IT Anonymous is a thing. And there is a support group for families. And that there's a website you can go on, and they have calls like twice a week. And it's people from all over the world who call in to support each other with the overuse of technology. So that was great. And then I would just say other moms who I connected with. Our faith is really the bedrock of our marriage and our family, and that was really important. Our extended family was really supportive. We did find an educational consultant. Her name's Rosemary Tippett. She was fantastic. I just felt so cared for to have an advocate who listened to me and went before us. I mean, she interviewed everybody in our circle of, everybody here where we live in North Carolina, and just gathered even like our son's cross country coach, the therapist, the, pediatrician. I mean, she tried to get a hold of everybody to find out their perspective. And that was amazing. She would get on our calls when my son was in the wilderness, and she would listen in on the calls, and she would offer feedback. She would meet with my son's therapist separately to get a perspective from him clinically to understand what was going on. And then she would inform us about other things. So that bird's eye perspective was really great. I also appreciated some different apps for meditation because I had to learn to take care of myself. I needed that reflective time. Learning about attunement for myself as a parent was really important, learning to be sensitive to my own emotions. There's a book we read called Parallel Process that was really helpful while my son was in wilderness, and we learned a lot of great therapy skills. So I think that's kind of the list of all the different things I can think of, things we leaned on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. All right, last question, kind of as we are, we talk about success, and the title of this podcast is called Success is Subjective for a Reason, right? The vision that you might have had for your son and kind of where he would be junior year in high school might be different now based on the journey that you have. But I'm just curious for you as that parent perspective, how do you define success for your son at this time?
I appreciate so much that you're asking and that you're thinking about it differently because it's hard. I feel like I had to grieve the loss of this norm in terms of his high school experience. And I think he also, has really wrestled with it because he was in denial. He couldn't accept this route. This was really hard. He felt like a failure. He felt rejected, but I don't see it as that. I see it like he just needed some different support. So I would say success looks like self-awareness. It looks like the courage to own your issues and talk about them instead of avoiding or pretending everything is fine when it's not. Being authentic about what's really happening. I would also say resilience, which is the ability to persevere through hardships. My son said many times that because he got through wilderness, he knows he can do anything. And I think it's really good that he knows that he's strong and that he can get through hard things because he's going to need that awareness later on down the road. We know that life gets really hard as an adult. I think honesty is really important for success, being a person of your word. And we saw that when he was young and living at home, as well as a teacher, he would say, I'll do that. I'll get to it. And then he couldn't. And I would think that lack of, we talked about being a person of your word. And so for me, success for him looks like saying he's going to do something and then following through, having the tools to make it happen, whether that's short term, like taking out the trash, getting your homework done, or long term, like I'm going to get through college, I'm going to get through high school, whatever it is. I think success is so much more about character than it is achievement. And it just looks like, who are you on the inside? It's more than a degree or a title. Someone could appear to be super successful on the outside, but if they can't build depth in relationships, they hurt themselves and the people around them, and they live in a false reality. And that's not success, that's a lie.
Wow, I feel like that was such a thoughtful and intentional way to dive into what success not just can look like, but where it lies in its importance. From the outside, we look at it differently, but what's more important is, like you said, let's look inside. How's that actually showing up? So, Sara, thank you so much for stepping in, being a guest on the podcast, sharing your parent perspective. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. And I do want to mention, if it's okay, that I learned so much through parenting that I realized my executive function skills are actually high. And I actually work for a therapist now. And so I've completed the certification, and I've begun coaching people, adolescents and adults who have executive function challenges. And so I'm happy for you to include a link in the show notes. And I can work remotely with anyone, anywhere. And so it's a pretty cool thing as a parent to feel like this challenge has been turned into something for good.
Perfect. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. Thanks again.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guests for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener-supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.